Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. It's me again, Jen. Hello! And it is Wednesday, September 2nd, and we are reading from the Goddess Tarot, which is a tarot deck written and illustrated by Chris Wilder. And I just think that this is an absolutely gorgeous deck. It's been in my collection for quite some time, as you can tell by the sad state of the book, which I'm totally embarrassed of. But I hope that we'll kind of get a new insight on these cards a little bit. Woo! Because most of the time I use these cards just as kind of more like oracle cards rather than actual reading. So I'm picking them apart a little bit differently this month, and we'll see what we get. So without further ado, let's see what our second card from the Goddess Tarot is. All right. This is kind of a nice card for Wednesday. So in this deck, we do have the four traditional suits, which are the pentacles, the wands, the cups, and of course, the swords. So swords are in this deck kind of related to Isis. So you're going to notice a lot more of like the kind of Egyptian pantheon to them. They're going to lean into some of the symbolism of Egypt and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see kind of how that plays out and how that is symbolized in this. And we've got the symbol for Isis here on the blankets. And we do have a woman laying in kind of repose on this bed, I'm going to say, in kind of a field of flowers. So Four of Swords traditionally is about rest and relaxation and kind of taking time away. And in a way, it relates back to the Hermit in that take time for yourself, take time to meditate, take time to be in your own space rather than that hustle and bustle of the world, which I gotta say, lately we've been very much in a Four of Swords sort of state of being, just globally speaking, with everything that's going on. So to see this card come up on its own is really not super surprising. It's nice as a middle of the week card because it's like, hey, maybe take a break, reassess before you plunge into the rest of the week, before you plunge into what's going to be a long weekend as well, and may actually have some social obligations to it, depending on where your position is on things. So the swords on this one, I get why they're kind of hanging the way they are, but it looks a little ominous on this one. So typically the swords may be hanging up on a wall or something like that. In this case, they're sort of hovering in the air, and that's a little scary because, those could fall at any moment on our poor sleeping lady, and that's a little disconcerting. And does make the initial glancing at this card, if you're new to reading or anything like that, you might see this as a card of kind of not destruction, but anxiety. A little bit more like the Nine of Swords is, which definitely is a card of anxiety. This one kind of has that energy to it as well because those swords are almost like set to fall on her. So it's a little bit daunting. And to somebody who's a new reader, they may see this and go, oh goodness, this is not a good card. Whereas realistically, if you know what the Four of Swords is and you've seen it in other decks and you've seen more traditional portrayals of it, you know it really is a card of rest. It's a card of repose. It's a card of taking a moment and reassessing things. It is not really a stressful card. To the contrary, it's a welcome reprieve from the stresses of life. It's a welcome reprieve from carrying the weight of these kinds of swords, of battling the day to day and doing and all that kind of stuff that happens with like everyday hustle and bustle and everyday existence. You get this sort of, I'm carrying this sword around, I'm carrying this weight, this weapon that I have to constantly hold at the ready for whatever might come at me. So I feel like if you're not certain of where these cards are going with this, you might perceive this as an attack in the visual of the card. There is some negative or I guess weakened aspects to this card. When you get it in reverse, it can mean, hey, you didn't get enough rest and you didn't get enough time to yourself. So that can be kind of the hazard of these swords hanging up, is it's like, hey, you better get up and move because these swords are going to fall and you're not going to have time to get out of the way. So to some degree, pardon, to some degree that does kind of call forth that more weaker aspect of the card, in that it's like, hey, get up, move, come on, let's go, which is not really the positive aspect of this card. The positive side is taking a break and taking your time and taking a look at how to really make the best of your time to yourself and ease back into things and really assess the situation. So I do like it in some ways because it does kind of evoke that lesser aspect to the card that isn't always represented very well in more traditional decks. I kind of want to go into a little bit of the Isis mythology and things like that too. Not so much the mythology, but looking at the artistry that's back here. It even has a more desert sort of look in the background. There is water. There's a little bit of water down here, which could be the Nile, could be indicative of how the Nile was near everything and everything revolved around the Nile. But otherwise, it's very desert. It's very arid and barren. And even though in the picture of this card, you have this sort of field of flowers in the background, the reeds and things that would be growing by the side of the Nile, it does say, hey, this is the oasis in this otherwise arid, kind of dead area behind it. I don't know if that's on every single one of the cards of Isis. I probably should look, but it's also interesting that Isis is the sword, because you think of Egypt and things like that, and it's a very like relevant to the times sort of. They had the water of the Nile was very important. So one might think that, hey, lean more into the water of things. But it's interesting that the sword is what represents Egypt and Isis and all of that. So I'm interested to see what other people might think of that. Of, hey, why the sword for Isis? Why is Isis the creature of the sword? I will say that Isis typically has her wings, and that carries people across the deserts and things like that. And so the air sign of the swords makes sense. But to maintain that we're going to stick with the symbology of the sword and not deviate from that, from the traditional suit, that's cool. That's kind of interesting. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. They could have chosen feathers for Isis. They could have chosen a lot of different options, but they did choose to stick with the traditional swords in the 4 suits. So we'll see if the other suits are similar. I do know that pentacles and cups are in there, and I do believe that the staves is in there, staves or rods. So I think that this entire deck has stuck to the traditional 4 suits and their representations. So maybe it is just the air sign side of things with Isis, and that these swords just kind of go hand in hand with that, and they didn't want to deviate. So all super interesting. I really like the colors of this card as well. So if you have any comments or questions or anything else about this deck, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'm always interested to get into conversations about, yes, this is a great card. No, it isn't. These are different decks. It's always really fun to kind of pick them apart and pick each other's brains about them. Also, as always, if you're interested in any of the weird stuff that I do, check out the other playlists on this channel, or check out the links in the description below for more information about this deck and more information about my website and some of the other weird stuff that I do on Discord and other places. All right, until next time, this has been really fun. I look forward to this month of picking through the goddess-centric deck of the Goddess Tarot. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and please stay cool. It's still really hot out there. All right, bye!